Hi, everyone. We are back today to answer actually one of the highest requested topics to cover. So, for today, we'll be answering the question of how to build relationships with VCs and investors before fundraising actually starts. So, without further ado, let's jump into it. Hi, everyone. My name is Shuo Chen. I am a former founder, now investing in founders and teaching founders at Berkeley and Stanford. I'm also a board member here at DECODE, the largest community of founders and technologists from Berkeley and Stanford. And I'm excited to be covering some of the top tactical questions that we get from founders. And hopefully we'll answer you with not just specific tactics, but also cover things like traps to avoid and tools that you can leverage in our attempt to answer your most commonly asked questions. So without further ado, let's jump into the topic today, which is how to build effective relationships with investors before fundraising. And today we'll be covering the 3 top tactics. So first tactic is track and tailor your investor conversations. So typically when you think about building relationships, you don't think of it in a very quantifiable way. But if your ultimate goal is to be able to raise and for your next round or just to fundraise in general, your goal is to be able to track and tailor and quantify as much as possible. So first, you want to tier potential investors into 2 buckets. Tier 1 are ideal investors that you would love to raise from. And then tier 2 are a larger group of investors compared to tier 1 that you'll be interested in, but you're not as excited about. So tier 1, typically this means ideal investors who have previously invested in companies just like the one that you're starting, or have started companies where you know that experience is so relevant to you that you would love to learn from them. And of course, tier 2 refers to a broader group where there might be top level industry fit, but there might not be as much of a specific good fit for, the specific business model you're building. Just an example here. And of course, as you tier investors into these buckets, you can start to track conversations. You can track each of your conversations and just understand what are the success metrics for these investors? What are the drivers that get them really excited about making an investment? How do these investors define good versus great? Of course, a lot of this can be research done in advance before you even schedule the conversation. But as you do this research, note this down in your tracker so you understand each of your investors before going in, and then update your tracker after these conversations so you have an updated note on who the best fit investors are. And of course, you want to ask questions to get to specific details as quickly as possible. So you want to ask questions to investors like, how do you define strong ARR growth? Specifically, what equation do you use in-house to be able to quantify this number? You want to ask these very specific questions to understand how these investors will assess you. And of course, you want to extract competitive insights for yourself as well. For example, what is the firm, the fund that you represent, seeing across the competitive landscape? What are other companies in this space doing? What are they doing well? And where do you see them lacking? And you want to ask these questions because conversations with investors are not just one way for you to fundraise, but is also another way for you to learn. So you want to understand how they think about the space that you're in and try to learn as much as possible and absorb. And hopefully by the end of all of these series of conversations, you'll land not only in a better place where you have deeper and better relationships, but that you also end up with more insights. And of course, at the end of the day, you want to map all of this investor data to help you assess alignment and identify the best fit. And of course, keep in mind that building relationships with investors is kind of like building any other kind of relationship. It's ultimately really about the fit. You want to make sure that they're a good fit for you personally, and then also for the startup that you're building, as well as for the industry and business model that is the right fit for this firm that you're going to be building. So again, tactic 1 is to track and tailor investor conversations. That brings us to tactic 2, which is really focused on building direct relationships with individual investors. At the end of the day, you want to build rapport with specific individual partners, not just the fund brand overall. You want to make the specific person feel special, engaged, and you want to use language like, I don't talk to most inbounds, but, or I don't reach out to any other investor, but I specifically identify you at this fund, or I'm not reaching to anyone else in X space but you because you posted this on LinkedIn. So you want to make sure that there is a very specific reason why this individual is the right fit for you. And then you also want to provide really just special just for you content for that particular investor as well that's not publicly accessible. And we're talking about not any generic content that you can just copy and paste via email. We're talking about so specific that it's just for that investor and just for that specific interaction. For example, some of the best founders I've seen will record short and private demo videos of a new feature they just launched because it's a topic that they just talked about with this potential investor. Or they'll follow up a meeting or a Zoom call with, again, a recorded video that adds a little bit more nuance to a new industry development that's come out that's going to impact the startup they're building. And of course, in this process, you want to walk these individual investors through your company vision, how you're thinking about execution, and your specific personal and professional goals for the next year to 3 to 5 years to 10 years plus. You want them to have a good understanding of how you're thinking about the now, next, and beyond. So again, to recap, Tactic 2 is all about building direct relationships with individual investors. And that brings us to the last tactic for today. Tactic 3 is you want to make yourself discoverable. So you want to make sure that the investors who are searching for public information can find content that you've created to help them stay, to keep you in their radar, right? You want to share simple videos, blogs, LinkedIn posts, anything that shows how you're thinking about building the company, what your customer interactions might look like, what the use cases might be, anything that helps you deepen that relationship with them. Especially after you've had a first personal touch point with them, you want them to understand what next steps look like. So after you've had this first touch point, they'll likely go online and just figure out what information is available out there on you. And you want them to be able to discover a deeper layer of more things, anything that sparked their curiosity that led them to searching online in the first place. You want them to be able to satisfy that curiosity with this additional content. So the goal of this is, of course, additional information, but ideally also giving the investor an opportunity for an inside look at your company's progress to build more trust and visibility. Of course, this doesn't have to be just public information. You could even do additional things for that inside look piece by adding them to a public channel onto your company Slack channel, or adding them to a very specific Discord channel, or adding them to an email distribution list for your employees. Something, or even like an open available Google Drive that you make available to them, something that gives people additional content to follow up. So to recap, the 3 tactics we talked about today are: 1, track and tailor your investor conversations so you go in prepared and always remember the latest conversations and research you have. 2, build direct relationships with individual investors, not just fund brands. And 3, make yourself discoverable through both public information as well as private inside information about your company that deepen that relationship over time. And so if you're curious to learn more about additional traps to avoid as you're carrying out these tactics, as well as additional tools to leverage, please feel free to learn more in the link below. We have hyperlinked the how you can read more that's covered in our newsletter down below. Otherwise, we're excited to share more about other top tactics for questions that we get from founders. So please feel free to comment with any additional questions that you might have, or just reach out to us on email or on any other social media platforms. Otherwise, we will see you next week. Take care.